Hello, and welcome back to the Vigati Video Podcast. This is a space where we host conversations with different designers, architects, and industry thought leaders. I'm Joe Agati, and I'm the host of your podcast today. In today's episode, we have the opportunity to talk with Toni Lombardozzi, project manager at Charleston County Public Library in Charleston, South Carolina. Combining 15 years of design and construction industry experience and close to a decade of working with libraries, Toni has a cross-discipline perspective and the challenge of translating library needs into physical space. Welcome to the podcast today. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Joe. How about yourself?
Good. It's always fun to kind of record these. I get a nice kind of step away from the usual kind of work here. So this is always great.
Right? I know. I was running around all morning to different branches, and I'm like, I get to go do something fun this afternoon. Not that that's something, but different.
Good. Well, I'm glad you could join us today. Actually, so we met at ALA in San Diego, which was a few months ago now. And I saw your presentation there. I was like, this would be great to have you on the podcast so you kind of share your experience with everybody. So just to start off, I guess I'd love to just get a background on you. Like, how'd you start? How'd you get here today? Things like that.
Yeah, definitely. So my background, I actually started out with going to school for architecture. So I have a master's degree in architecture. And then I started my career on that side of things. I was working in a design office, really enjoyed it. And then the Great Recession hit, like it did for so many people my age. And I got laid off in 2010. And at that point, I was out living in Phoenix, Arizona, and the design and construction industry was in really rough shape. So like a lot of my coworkers, we were pretty much open to just taking anything that was remotely related to any kind of construction, design, anything, right? I actually consider myself pretty lucky. I got a job working for the state of Arizona, and I was overseeing grant-funded construction projects. All different types of things. We had housing rehab, new senior facilities, road construction, which admittedly I don't have a ton of experience with. And in doing that, I found out that I was actually really good at the project management side of things.
Okay.
So then I had decided around about 2015, 2016, I wanted to move back to the East Coast and started looking for, maybe some project management roles. And I saw the advertisement for Charleston County Public Library that they had this $108 million project where they were going to build 5 new libraries, renovate the rest of their asset portfolio. And I was like, hey, building libraries for a living, that sounds pretty much like a dream job to me. Let me go throw my name in the hat. I guess they liked me because here I am. It's been 8 years now. And we are still going along. We're getting closer to the end. We've still got a couple more projects that we're working on.
Okay. And so this has been, I'm sorry, you said going on for like 10 years now?
Yeah. So I've been with Charleston County Public Library for 8 years now. It'll be 8 years this fall. And they actually started the project back in 2012 when they went out for a bond referendum to get the money for the project. Okay. So for any of us that have worked on government projects, we know there is quite a process in getting the funding and then moving into contract and what that all looks like. So, so even between that portion with, getting the bond passed and then myself getting hired was 4 years. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So how many projects are covered under the bond?
At the end, we will have 19. So included 5 new libraries from the ground up, renovation at 13 existing facilities. And then we also did a major rehab on an old sort of combo office warehouse building that we moved our administrative team over to that facility.
Interesting. So I guess you've been doing this for a little while. It sounds like mostly with Charleston. Is that a common way that people are doing kind of construction, renovations, new libraries, passing bonds? Is it, are people doing it as large packages like that, or what's been your experience there?
Not so much large packages. Pretty much anybody that I've talked to, they're like, you guys are insane. What are you doing? A neighboring county recently passed a bond. They did 3 branches. So that's a lot more common. What I've seen for people. I have seen a few different municipalities here and there across the country do something similar.
Okay.
I mean, the scope of this project with the total revamp touching all of our buildings it's pretty unique.
How do you, I guess, yeah, I guess that's why I asked. It does sound unique. I mean, I've kind of seen it the other way. I guess it's kind of
Right.
interesting. It's like, you know, 3 or 4 or something, versus touching the whole kind of system. Is there benefit in doing it this way that you guys have found?
There definitely is. You know, I will say the reason we ended up doing it this way is because we didn't really touch our facilities for about 20 years.
Oh, wow,
And,
okay.
you know, anybody who owns public buildings knows they take a beating, right? So
Mhm.
when I came on board, I was like, okay, I get it now. I understand why we need $108 million. Everything really needed to be redone top to bottom.
Yeah.
So that was how we got there. And in some ways, it was great for us because what it allowed us to do was take a step back and really assess where we wanted to go as a whole system, right?
Mm.
So rather than piecemealing different things, we were able to say, this is what we want our new workflow to look like. This is how we want our customer service to be, front facing to the patrons. This is what we want our branding to look like.
Yeah.
We were able to incorporate that everywhere.
Mhm.
We even did a rebranding when we started the project. So we had a new logo, we
Okay.
have new colors. So we rolled that out every time we would, open a new facility, all new signage. The new logo was on there.
Mm.
So now, like I said, we've just got a couple left. You can drive through Charleston County. And even though all of the branches are different, they all have that same kind of vibe. We kind of feel, we've used typical furniture throughout them. So as a
Mhm.
patron, they recognize, the spaces. So for us, that's been great.
Okay.
The reality is it's not likely that everybody's going to be able to do that. It's a massive undertaking.
Yeah, no, but I think that makes a lot of sense that, I think that's where it's challenging for people because you're saying it's the piecemeal side is the other way. And I think everything has its pros and cons, but I can really see the benefit of like, okay, let's look at it kind of globally.
Right.
Right. So you're talking about setting standards and branding. Just to touch on that real quick. So for the furniture, did you guys set like a universal standard or was there variation between branch to branch? Like, how did you manage that? I'm always kind of curious.
So we decided that we wanted certain things that would be consistent everywhere. So
Okay.
all of our larger facilities have community rooms where, the public can come in and use those. We do programming there. And we decided that there were certain things we wanted. We wanted all of our tables and chairs across the system and all of those facilities to be the same. The intent is that those types of pieces of furniture will remain where they are, but if anything ever needs to shift around, it's great to have it consistent. We also figured we're going to test out a bunch of stuff. Let's pick what we like and stick with it. So, we kind of had our key things that most people are looking for. We want lightweight. We want something that's going to be durable and take a beating, easy to move around, all those kind of buzzwords. And we had several furniture vendors send us all different kinds of things. And I mean, we were climbing on tables, sitting backwards on chairs, like how teenagers would, and trying to, does this pass the library test? Because we did want a lot of that stuff to be consistent. I will also say back of house, we went with all the same systems furniture, certainly different configurations depending on what branch you're at. But that way, again, it's all the same. It's easier for facilities and maintenance over time on that as well.
Yeah.
And then what we did at each of the branches is we wanted to have, it was really important for us to have each branch have its own feel, depending on the community. We're a huge county. We have some really urban settings. We have some very rural settings, different user groups across the county. So we really wanted to make sure that the furniture and the feel of the building overall fit where it was going to be built, right? So that was, the lounge furniture and some kind of different flavors of things in the children's area and the teen spaces. We wanted to make sure that those were unique to each branch, but still kind of felt again like they fit with all of our branding.
So how did you guys approach like the community engagement side of this? I mean, because again, it's massive undertaking over a long period of time. What was that journey like?
It was very interesting. So at the beginning, and a lot of this started before I came on, we knew that we wanted to build 5 branches throughout the county 3 of them were in areas where we were replacing much smaller facilities with a new one. 2 of them were brand new locations. So
Okay.
for those 5 areas, we actually held community meetings. Once we had the location set and knew about how large the facilities would be, we went out there and we talked with the community. We, invited people to come by and give us their feedback. We wanted all ages to come out. We heard from, elementary school kids too. It was really great. And at that time, we were working with a design team who helped us put together a program manual.
Okay.
We had all kinds of information in there, and they compiled all of that for us in terms of, here's all the ideas that the community came up with. And there were certainly things that we were seeing consistently throughout the county.
Mm-hmm.
And there were other things that, depending on the area that, where we were building, were unique to that space. And we really tried to highlight those. One of our communities is, it's an older community historically. People have lived there for several generations.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of preservation of that history was really important to them. So we actually incorporated a kind of a small digital media room for them where we have, we have a VHS to DVD converter and some kinds of technology like that made those things a little bit more accessible for that community because that was something that they wanted. So we tried to listen at the beginning. And then once we got to a certain point in design, we came back out, same facilities again that we had presented before and opened up for the communities to come in to share where we were, roughly about schematic design development. So they had a good idea, a little sneak peek on what was coming and, get a little more feedback from them. And then as we've been working on the projects, keeping the community informed on when the branch is going to go offline for the ones that have been renovated, try to give them an idea of how long the closure is going to be. Some locations we've been able to have a temporary facility in place. So communication is really key, and we have a fantastic communications team at our system, which is great.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I guess, so you said three of the libraries were replacement branches, right? So they were too small or something. You tore them down and then rebuilt. Was that on the same site or was that?
They were actually 3 unique ones. So one of the buildings was about 1,000 square feet, and it was essentially an old public works, tiny little building that the library moved into. Public Works actually took the building over again. Truthfully, I'm not actually sure what they ended up doing with that one. And we built a new facility not too far down the road from that one.
Okay.
And then another facility, kind of a similar situation, the town of James Island, that was located on James Island, ended up taking over the old building from us, and they were able to turn it into a town facility.
Okay.
And then our final one, this one was actually a fun project. Originally the name of the branch was the Cooper River Memorial Library. And it had been designated as a memorial to war, right? To World War II, people who had served. So we kind of were going back and forth. We couldn't figure out if the building was considered a historical monument that needed to stay, if we just needed to maintain the land. So what we ended up doing was keeping a large section of the building. When I say large section, the building was only about 6,000 square feet. So we kind of took off a little bit of an addition that had been put on, kept about 5,000 square feet of that space. It became the children's area at our new branch. And then we added about 15,000 square feet on. So that was a really fun project. Obviously came with a lot of its own challenges. But that was cool that we were able to kind of old and the new together.
Yeah, no, that does sound cool. Well, segue into challenges. So it's interesting in, the bond side, doing everything once. I mean, like you said earlier, it makes a ton of sense. You can look at it from a holistic perspective, go through the rebranding, everything. I mean, there's got to be a lot of benefits. Doing it this way, like, those are pros. What would you say the cons are? Maybe like lessons learned now that you're kind of maybe on the other side of a lot of it. What would your perspective on that be?
I think one of the hardest things is change fatigue. This is a lot to throw at your staff, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
a lot to open one new facility,
Mm-hmm.
to continuously open and bring branches offline and reopen over the course of 8 to 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, you have your individual branch staff that are working on their location, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's an upheaval for them. You have staff that have to be shifted around. If their branch is offline for 18 months, it's not like
Mm-hmm.
we're laying them off or furloughing them or something. So we find a different home in the system for them to work. There's coordinating all of that. And then behind the scenes for our administrative teams, our IT department, our collections department, kind of the ongoing joke is just like, what are we going to do when these projects are over and it's back to just having like a normal workload again? And because it has been 8 years of these
Yeah.
excellent projects,
Yeah.
so I think keeping everybody on track and staying excited about it,
Mm-hmm.
it can be a challenge. And for the branch staff, it's hard. I mean, I feel like any government project is sort of hurry up and wait sometimes.
Yeah.
So several of our branches that have been kind of more towards the back end of the project, we've rearranged the order of when we thought we were going to be working on those facilities. So it was like, oh, you're going to be next. And then it's like, actually, it's going to be another year or two. So trying to manage the fatigue of that with staff. And that's hard, and then also, yes, it sounds great. We picked out all these things for the branches and we're excited about certain things. But of course, if you implement something across the system and then you find out maybe that wasn't the best choice, and now we have like 6,000 of these chairs or, whatever that may be. And we haven't seen that on a huge scale, knock on wood. But we have had a few things here and there that we've been like, oh yeah, maybe we could have done that a little bit differently. Luckily we've been able to take what we learned, on the first ones and pass them along. I joke around that I'm like, yeah, the oldest child, we didn't really know what we were doing, but now that I'm like kid 15, I feel like I have a clue. So
yeah, right.
But yeah, I think the fatigue is the hard part. Everybody's sort of like, okay, we're still working on this project.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I could see it from obviously the constant change and things like that. Probably for a work population that's not dealing with obviously the library has evolved and changed, but like probably day to day, it's not nearly as chaotic as like a construction project or series of construction projects. I could see that wearing on people. Well, another thing too, over the span of time how did you guys manage? Because I think there's that challenge of, over 10 years, you have like materials challenges that things could change. How do you manage that during a 8-year long project?
We make it up as we go. I'll be candid.
Yeah, right.
Like you start out the project and, we had all the best intentions. And it's actually funny, when I got hired, they're like, this will be about a 5-year project. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, this is very ambitious for 5 years, but I'm happy to go along for the ride. Well, of course, here we are 8 years later. But yeah, so we have also, well, let me take a step back here. We also had the pandemic thrown in there. So that was fun, and I know you guys experienced the same thing and all of the challenges at that time of, companies that just went out of business or, all of a sudden it was something that we were used to being able to get in 8 or 10 weeks. And then it was maybe we could get it in a year. So there were a lot of times, and, even since that has kind of calmed down, there have been things that's like, we really loved using that. It's been discontinued.
Yeah.
For example, we started out with book carts for library staff, and we were like, these are perfect. We're using them. We love them. We're doing it everywhere. And it was like 1 or 2 cycles ago, our vendor came back and they're like, they discontinued those. So this intention of having everything the same, they're like, well, here's the new model. I'm like, okay, it's kind of different. You learn to roll with a lot of things, because something like that, there's not really much we can do about it, short of, I don't know, going to eBay and seeing if we can find something somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there have been a few things where we've had to get a little bit creative, particularly during the pandemic, that again was a tough time for everybody. There were times where we opened with sort of temporary things in place just because we're like, we don't want to keep a facility closed for 4 extra months because we're missing 4 tables, so what can we kind of put in there in the meantime that we can get, off the shelf from somewhere? So
yeah, well, speaking of that, because like, again, being the furniture guy,
right.
furniture person, I'm always at the last end. And yeah, I mean, we've, full disclosure, we've run late on projects before, especially like in the pandemic era, and now maybe a little post-pandemic, how like that side of the timeline, I guess maybe I'll be more direct instead of being around the bush. Like, did you really stagger out like, hey, we're not going to do any special event until everything's here and open? Because sometimes it's like the governor's coming on this day. It's like, oof, okay. Yeah. How did you manage stuff like that? Because this is a big deal, right? You said 19 branches, like we're about 8 years in investment, multi-million-dollar bond, like.
Exactly. Yeah. And every community, every time we open or reopen a branch, they're super excited. And that's we're happy about that. But we started from the very beginning, and luckily we had an executive team that was on board with this. And like I said, a great communications team. We hold very firm on how we manage dates and when they're released to the public. And, we're not doing anything shady. We just don't want to say to somebody, oh, we're going to open September 15th. And this is back in June. Way too many things can happen. Just like you said, everybody has the best intentions, but occasionally, I mean, I actually just had a furniture delivery today. We thought everything was on the truck. One of the tables had 1 leg instead of 4. So, and it's like, okay, we're pretty sure it's back at the warehouse. They'll go back and get it. I'm not opening tomorrow, so it's no big deal, right?
Yeah.
But those are the kinds of small things that we work really hard to wait. We wait until staff are back in the building. We let them get a feel for the space and start arranging things. And then after they've been there for about a week, we sit down, we all have a meeting and we talk through, okay, what are our expectations? Depending on the size of the branch, it might take longer to get it ready to open. And that's when we start lining people up. Okay, we call the mayor. Hey, this is the date we're looking at. Does it work for you? They're kind of our keynote speaker. Yes, we've got them for Tuesday. Perfect. That's what we're going to do. And then once that's finalized, then we release that date to the public. Because so much of it is just managing that behind the scenes. And they don't all need to know about the chaos that we all see. Right?
Yeah, right.
Because it's crazy behind the scenes. Everybody knows that. That's, on our side of things. So we try to make it look a little more streamlined and, kind of manage expectations that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I know that's always like, I think that's the hardest part. And sometimes I think it's probably challenging, because stuff will happen outside of other people's control. But I think the key thing from what I heard is like, it's getting everybody at a certain level kind of on the same page with that philosophy. Because I know that's always really the hardest. And I hate always when, I hate having to see people rush things.
Right.
Don't make a decision now that's going to be impacting you for the next 20 years. Because 5 years from now, you're not going to remember that, hey, we had to rush this because of XYZ reason. I mean, granted, we work on the back end of construction projects, but I've had my own share of office renovations, and we just moved our entire office in Reno. And when we came over here, I was like, I want to avoid as many 30-year mistakes as possible.
Right.
We've got one that we're living with. I knew there was going to be something. There's always something. But I'm like, if I can give to 1 or 2, I'll be happy. Because the last building, there were a lot. I was like,
yep, exactly.
Yeah. So I think that, that's interesting. I think that's kind of the key thing that I think a lot of maybe people take for granted a bit is like getting that team on the same page. So speaking of team, what was the team makeup? Like who was part of your group when you're working through this this whole renovation process?
Yeah, it's been huge and it's shifted, from the beginning to where we are now. So when we first started out, one of the things I mentioned earlier was that we worked to put together a program manual. And the intent of that was to cover those 5 new branches and set up things that we wanted to be consistent throughout. We even have really boring technical stuff in there, like what is the HVAC system going to look like? I
Mm.
say boring, very important, but
Yeah, right.
boring if you're just going to sit down and read through a document. And so, we started out very early working with our facilities team. We are a component of Charleston County government, so we are tied very closely with them. And when it went out for the bond referendum, it went out as Charleston County. So we have a team on the county side that we've worked very closely with. And then, a little bit more on the micro level, when we started, again, we hadn't really done anything like this in several years at our system. So we tried to work through, a handful of key people who could sit down in these initial meetings with the design teams and kind of start talking through things. So I was there. We started out with our executive director, deputy director. We had our facilities manager. So those kind of key people that could weigh in and be like, this is a great piece of furniture. This is, why we don't want to have paper towel dispensers in every restroom. All those kinds of little things. That was really great at the beginning. It helped me get really familiar with the system, helped us all kind of hash through and make sure we were all on the same page at the executive level. And then as we've gone through and we've done more and more projects, we're not doing so much by committee now. I pretty much am the one that's the liaison. I'll sit in with the design teams. We've got, like I said, talked about the typicals. We know what toilet paper dispensers we want. We know what hand dryers we want. So those kinds of things. And the lessons learned about, we want to put a stainless steel plate under that hand dryer. All those little things that don't need a whole committee to talk through them anymore. So that's kind of shifted over time a little bit. But definitely starting out, making sure people were on the same page, and then also making sure that the right people were there to convey that down the line to all of the staff.
Okay. No, that makes sense. I mean, I think that's I've always, again, being on the back end, that's always been, I think, a challenge for some people, is being part of that. It's a committee process. And I think some people don't always estimate the time that adds. Not that it's a bad thing. It's not. Obviously, you want to have the right engagement. But yeah, I think it sounds great that you guys were able to cross that hurdle at a certain point and be like, okay, well, we don't need a committee decision to vet every single time we're going to put a hand, a hand towel dispenser or something, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's probably, is that probably where like some of the standards kind of come in to play when you're working across that, setting that?
It is, absolutely. And again, certain things like, okay, we all tested out all of these different tables at the beginning. We all decided this was the one we liked and we're going with. So we're just going to continue with that, unless we get feedback from our branches that something's not working. Because we certainly don't want to just keep repeating mistakes either. But yeah, so that's been really helpful, particularly as we've gotten further down the line and I can sit down with our furniture vendor and be like, yeah, okay, remember those tables we've used 8 times? We're going to use some of that this time. So that goes quicker. And then our staff at the new facilities that have been temporarily working somewhere else are familiar with all of those new systems. And then they bring it over. And, that extends also particularly to all of our IT and infrastructure. All of that is very over my head. We have a fantastic IT manager and team that I work closely with, and all of their equipment, they've worked really hard to standardize that so that if we have staff that move around, it's the same, which is great for somebody like me who can only figure it out one time anyway.
So during this whole process, I mean, I think we talked about little lessons learned, but were there like any common roadblocks that you guys are run into? If so, like, how did you kind of manage that, work through them?
I would say the biggest roadblock or challenge that I run into, and this is not even just strictly with libraries, this is just my entire career in this industry, and you probably see the same thing, is once you get to a certain point in the project, trying to make major changes. I mean, of course, little things are going to come up, like we've talked about, maybe something's discontinued, you need to tweak something, it didn't fit, whatever. That all makes sense. But trying to finagle these major changes partway through construction is really challenging. And a lot of it just comes from the fact that if you don't do this for a living, you don't realize, how much has already gone into place. So I'll field questions sometimes like, oh, well, can we just move this wall? The wall hasn't been built yet. Like, well, Okay, the answer to that is yes, it's possible,
Yeah.
but how much do you want to pay? And what else are you willing to sacrifice? Because maybe the plumbing lines have already been run to a certain area or
Yeah.
across or something. Is that going to have an impact on the ceiling and everything that's also been ordered for that? Are you changing flooring material? All of those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that I've tried to do with my team is after I kind of, got in their heads a little bit more at the beginning and realized, oh, okay, now I see why you're asking this question because you don't know that, was to kind of sit down and talk through those things. That's a benefit of working across many projects with the same team once you've done it once, talking through that. So I think that's one of the biggest things that people kind of bring on themselves,
Yeah.
So I would say really important to work with your design and construction teams and make sure that you understand what those drop dead dates are, and then if there is something major that needs to be changed, just understand all of the domino impacts that can have. I think that's probably one of the biggest ones, construction wise. And then at the opposite end of that, I would say staff. And that's a hard one for me to say. I work with 350 of the most amazing people that I could ever dream of working with. But every now and again, you will get somebody who's not on board with your changes. And that can make it really difficult. One of the things we changed in our facilities, we used to have these giant service desks, like every library in the country. And I'd say giant. Some of them were like 200 square feet of space. I mean, you can get that with that real estate. You don't need that anymore. The way technology is, you don't need that storage and surface area anymore. We changed. We went to a much sleeker model, and across the board, almost everybody was on our same wavelength with that, right? But every now and again, you get somebody who's like, they just don't want to change. And that's really hard because then everything you've put into this design doesn't work because they won't embrace that new workflow, So for that, I would say try to sit down and talk with your staff early, get them on board, explain what changes are coming, and explain to them why you're making those changes, and really listen to their feedback too. The flip side of that is I always tell people, don't design in an executive bubble. Don't design in your office thinking, oh, I did that job 25 years ago. I know exactly what they need. So it goes both ways. Make sure that you talk to them about why decisions are being made. But if they have a really good point of maybe why something shouldn't change or shouldn't look the way that you're thinking, respect that and walk through it well and do it early.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know it's like the people side can be challenging, and now I'm speaking as an employer or business owner. It's tough. It's tough, especially you want the whole team to move forward in one direction, and yeah, that can be a challenge, especially big change, especially like, I think to, have the benefit and the challenge of like librarians are probably some of the most passionate people as a group of people I've ever met, which is great. I mean, you kind of need people like that working in those spaces. But with like strong passion comes like strong conviction, right? It's like,
absolutely.
So yeah, I think that's good advice. I mean, I think talking early, like you're saying, that probably has a huge impact, especially because it sounds like you guys went through a lot of change, right? A lot of change. So
we ran the gamut. Like I said, we pulled out those giant service desks. We went to a much smaller model. We decided to also roll out automated materials handling and self-check at roughly the same time. I mean, so we were really going from the 90s library to, the 2020s, like system-wide, at what felt like a very rapid pace, when things have been stagnant for so long. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. So I want to shift gears a little bit. I know we've been talking a lot about the the bond project there, which is very fascinating. But you had mentioned, you'd shared, you believe public libraries are one of the last truly open venues for free exploration education. I guess tell me more about that. Where you're coming from with that.
So this is one that I could talk about for hours. You talk about being passionate. So I'll try to kind of not get too much on a soapbox. I really think like our world has become so consumer focused. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think that we lose sight of the need for spaces where anybody is welcome and you can just exist in that space, right? There's no expectation that you have to have a coffee or you have to buy this product or you have to listen to our commercial or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Everybody's familiar with all the traditional stuff that we have at the resources. If you want to, read a book, flip through a magazine, search the internet, all of that. But there's so much more. And okay, this is where I'll get on my soapbox just for a second, because there are so many people that don't realize how much the libraries offer nowadays. The educational resources are almost endless. We've got classes where you can learn a new language, workforce development with resume writing, interview skills, job searching, all of that. Many libraries are starting maker spaces, creative studios where they have sewing machines, 3D printers, all that kind of stuff. I've seen libraries, we don't have anything like this in our system, but where they have, a full-on woodworking shop. And I just think that's so great. Other libraries around the country are starting to have places where you could check out a carpet cleaner or, a Sawzall or something and use them for a couple weeks, which I think is also amazing because how often are you I need this one thing for this one job, And then in addition to all of that, you've got the physical spaces in the buildings. We've got meeting rooms, study rooms, there's performance spaces, and then the resources that we bring in, lawyers, we bring in people for tax assistance every year, making connections for social services for people. Libraries are starting to offer even some basic healthcare, like come on in for a blood pressure check and that sort of thing. The thing that's crazy to me is all of that is free. It's all available.
Yeah.
You just have to walk in the door, and it amazes me how, like you said, the library staff are so passionate. I try to visit libraries when I'm traveling and everybody is always so excited to offer these things and to help you whatever you need when you walk in the door. And nobody asks you what kind of house you live in, what kind of car you drove to get there, what's your income, what's your background. There's none of that. Everybody's equal when they come to the library. Everybody's welcome to stay from open to close. And I think today, particularly where things have been, everything's just gotten so expensive and the pace of the world is to feel, grueling and nonstop. I think that access to these types of things is it's critical. And it's a little bit cheesy, but I do think there's still some magic in that too. Yeah.
Well, I think what's probably, and maybe this is the bubble I live in, it feels like everything's so commoditized, right?
Right.
And it's it's kind of gone the other way where it's things 20, 30 years ago, buying an appliance was a major investment, right? And you expect to have that appliance for a long period of time. Well, now we live in an app is just $1 and it's everything's just that. So, and it's what are all these really micro ways to, commoditize everything. And you're right, the library is this kind of magical place where everything's free. I can just go here and sit all day and not have to pay. I mean, I guess you're paying through your taxes, but that's what your tax dollars do, right? That's the whole point. You're getting this service. So yeah, I think that's where kind of it's harder, I think, for people to understand maybe that hey, this even exists. I think once people are there, it's that's great. So yeah, very interesting perspective. I agree. Yeah, it's and I think that's like you're saying, it adds to the magic.
Right.
Right. So I'm gonna put you in the hot seat a little bit. I always like to ask people, you've been doing these, I guess especially in Charleston here, these renovations, and new construction projects. What, and it doesn't have to be in there too, but I guess what has been your favorite project?
So, I will say that I do joke around with staff around here that these branches are like my children, right? So I shouldn't necessarily pick a favorite, but
everybody has a favorite child. I mean, come on,
right,
we just don't admit it.
But there's a couple things that come to mind. The first branch that we worked on as a team, that was our Wando Mount Pleasant facility. It was from the ground up.
Mm.
40,000 square feet. So other than our flagship main library that already exists, this was the largest branch. Not sure why we decided to do that one first, but here we are. It was absolute insanity. And when I say we started this project and we didn't really know what we were doing, I work with a team of everybody who's really great at their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But all of a sudden it was like, oh, this is looking at things in a completely different way and on top of everything that we do day to day anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
I at least have the luxury of my job is these buildings. They're all doing the other stuff on top of it. So when we were getting ready to open that facility, it was insane. We were cramming so many hours in the months leading up to it. Like I had mentioned, our collections team, IT team, the new branch staff, and we had all these things happen. Like we didn't actually have potable water in the building until the day before staff got there. Our service desk was on a truck somewhere that we couldn't quite get a clear answer on exactly where. So that finally arrived just a few weeks before we were set to open. And that was one project where, since it was the first one, that we were getting some pushback on like, okay, we got to get it open. Let's try. So, there was some exhaustion there. It was absolutely insane. But there was charm in that chaos too.
Yeah.
We built such a great team around that. And then when patrons walked in and we opened and you got to see the expression on their face, this is the first one and this setting the precedent for what the system is going to be like.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. And that one was it was such an experience, right? And then on the opposite end of the spectrum from that one, we just finished up renovating one of our small rural branches out in McClellanville. It's about 1,200 square feet, so smaller than a lot of American homes. I've always had a special place in my heart for rural communities and the sort of unique circumstances that they face.
Mm-hmm.
And we worked really hard with that branch to try to keep it offline as short a duration as possible. We did have a small temporary space with a couple of computers, but, no substitute for the real deal. Now, of course, there's not a whole ton that you can do in a facility that small. We weren't going to really change walls around or anything. But we updated it. We made it feel a lot more visually appealing. We reconfigured. We got some nice soft seating in there for the patrons, some more computer access. A lot of people who live out there rely on us for internet. They don't even have an internet at home, And then we joked around that if you looked at that one as a ratio of the square footage of the building compared to how many people showed up for the grand opening, that it was probably our biggest opening. Community turnout. We had like 2 elementary school classes there. It was lovely. So being a part of that and seeing how important that service is to the community, it's very heartwarming. It reminds you why you put up with all the craziness behind this.
Yeah, right. Well, cool. Well, thanks for sharing. So I guess I'm going to put you on the spot one more time. Last time, just in closing, what would you say? You've given a lot of great advice and a lot of great experience, the conversation. So I really appreciate that. But what would you say would be some good words of wisdom or advice in closing here?
Oh, let's see. All right. Well, we all know these projects are crazy. Anytime you're going to build something new or reopen, whatever, the deadlines, the red tape, the tiny budget, whatever you're working with, it's a very complicated dance.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, when the project is finished and you have the opportunity to watch people interacting in your space, whether it's a library or any other kind of facility that's open to the public, and you had a hand in creating that, it's incredibly humbling, right? Libraries in particular, when you get to watch that little kid run over to the board book bin and start looking through there very excited, or they tuck themselves into a chair with their sibling to read a book. Or maybe you see someone who's older and learning a new skill like embroidery or 3D printing or something. Again, just knowing that you were kind of a cog in that machine is so rewarding. There are absolutely times where you are going to want to scream, you're going to want to cry. There's probably someone you're going to want to kick off the project, but you're going to get through it. And at the end, you will have learned so much in the process. But I think, I'll be a little cheesy again. But at the end, what you are offering is a welcoming space for your community. It's something that you should be really proud of.
Cool. Well, no, I think that's great insight. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Well, I appreciate your time today. This has been great. I think a lot of really good information. especially in a unique situation like said, doing so many library projects all under one kind of umbrella. Obviously has some pros, some real pros and benefits of doing that the way. So I appreciate the time today.
Thanks, Joe. It's been a pleasure.